Hello, and welcome back to In Presence We Trust. Today, I'm joined by a very special man who many people probably already know. This is Damien Bohler, and he's become well known because of your attachment writings and relational ponderings and insights, and the way you write and make videos has been so inspiring and so insightful for so many
Mm,
people. So I'm really excited to have you on today.
mm. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And since the
Mm,
last time I saw you, and I mean, even just recently, you're now also a new dad. And I think that's
I
worth
am.
mentioning because
Mm,
I mean, I think motherhood is probably a little bit of a different initiation, but fatherhood is, I mean, you can't really compare. You're a different species now. Welcome
mm.
to the biological parent club.
And I feel it. I knew that something would change, and I didn't know what. And it's so subtle, but it also so distinct, like unignorable. You can't really describe it to other people. Just there's this subtle difference, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm different now, and there's there's a deeper level of purpose existing inside of me than was there before, and I didn't know that there was that deeper layer available. I didn't even know it existed, and now it's here. Yeah.
It's indescribable, and I keep people who
Mm,
don't have children, and then you go through that portal, you're like, "Oh, I wish someone would have told me." And I'm like, it doesn't even
mm-hmm,
matter if someone tells you because the telling still can't really prepare you for what's
mm-hmm.
coming.
And it makes sense, like feeling it makes sense why the impulse to have children is there. Like it's part of who
Mm,
we are biologically, right? But on the other side, you haven't had kids, you're like, yeah, I could have kids or not have kids. And then you have, it's like, and it's so fast, right? Yeah, I have a child, and then it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Like there's some innate part of my purpose of being alive is to do this.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And how could I not? Like, my life
Mm.
would have been so not lived fully had I not taken this
I
step and
believe
this
that.
initiation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really wild. I know before I became a parent, I was just like, "Oh, parents," and it's kind of like,
Hmm.
"Okay, like you're busy and we don't have a lot in common." And then as soon as I became a parent, I was just like, "I just want to be around parents." Just parents. Everyone else, you don't get it.
We're a little club now.
Yeah, welcome to the club. And it will grow. You know, the other thing about being a parent for me has been that I thought my child would come and I would just like love her infinitely and it would be like the top. But it's actually been that love has grown over time. And
Mm,
I have also become more of a parent over time. So like the intimacy and the depth that I've explored with this little being is incredible. I'm just like, this is the most
mm,
intimate relationship of my life, you know?
mm, mm.
And this
I
is where
absolutely believe that.
the day to day, the over and over, the nights and the hard times, and that's where actually becoming a parent takes place.
Mm. Yeah, totally.
I'm
I
so
get it.
excited. I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited
Mm,
also to see how your writings and your insights and all of
mm,
that shifts and
mm.
because it will start to directly impact your work, and I'm so excited for that for you.
Yeah, yeah. I have no doubt. I'm still waiting. It's just been kind of busy since he arrived, and I've been waiting to write about it publicly about our birth, which was just gorgeous as well. It was just the two of
Mm,
us, just me and
yeah,
my wife,
yeah.
nobody else, no midwife, no doula, just the two of us in a birth pool, and
Wow.
it was like an hour and a half of labor. That was it. And then he arrived, and a thunderstorm rolled in 30 minutes before he arrived. It started thunderstorming, and then he arrived, and an hour after he arrived, the thunderstorm went away.
Wow.
And 2 nights before he was born, we had another thunderstorm. We had a python come into the house, and then we kind of shoot it out, and then in the morning the python was like around on the other side of the house near where the birth space was, and then the day after he was born there was like a tree frog just attached to the window, like looking at him for like hours. It's like kind of just magical. Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing the magic that takes place in that like
Yeah.
liminal
Yeah.
space. Wow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's his name?
Kairos.
Kairos.
Kairos. It's so in it's Greek. In the Greek kind of understanding of time, there's chronos, which is linear time, right? It's the unfolding of linear time, and there's kairos, which is like non-linear time. It's the now, it's the opportune moment that exists.
Mm,
Then his middle name is Raiden, which is the Japanese god of thunder and lightning.
beautiful. So sweet.
Yeah.
So sweet. I can
Yeah.
just see the love and the radiance in your face still. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to getting to know him more. I'm a little bit superfluous at this moment. My job is to hold the structure and hold mama and to hold everything in place.
Mm,
While, I mean, he's cluster feeding right now, so he just feeds and sleeps and stretches and makes cute noises and kind of stares. But I can feel that I'm not fully registered yet. As
yeah.
like I'm there, but there's no, and I'm like really looking forward to get to meet him more as he kind of wakes up out of that early feeding phase.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in the what do they call it? The fourth trimester, which is the three
Yeah,
months, I think, after birth. So he's still kind
yeah,
of, yeah, he's still in
yeah,
there a little bit.
yeah. He's
Mm,
just trying to feed and grow.
yeah. And attached to mama. Sweet. You're gonna be such an amazing dad. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And happy you have a son for some reason. That's also super sweet.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, well let's get back to the task at hand. I want to like understand the arc a little bit of your career and where you started off in group facilitation and kind of where you are now and a little bit of that
Mm,
your
mm,
journey as a facilitator.
mm.
Yeah, do it.
So my second degree, I mean, I did part of a first degree engineering, and I hated it, and I quit uni and took some time off, and then I came back and I started doing environmental science. And like while I was studying that degree, things started changing in my life. There was a local market that I used to go to, and I started hanging out with a dude who was into conspiracy theories and natural health, and he started informing me, and another dude who was like a couple of dudes who were big into herbs and herbal teas, and I kind of like started being mentored by these interesting men, and there was this change that started happening. And so I was studying environmental science, environmental biology, and I'm coming up to my very last semester, my very last subject, and we had to do kind of a group assignment and on a topic, and it was a group of three. One person had to make a website, one person had to write a report, and one person was to do a speech, but all on the same topic. And I ended up getting the topic, what's in the food we eat. And like it activated something inside me, and I went down a massive rabbit hole of research just independently, just got super obsessed. Like it opened up worlds and worlds, and so all that stuff was kind of happening at once. And originally, like I was like, oh, website sounds really interesting, I'd like to learn. But once I started exploring that subject, something woke up in me, and I came to the people I was doing this assignment with, and I said, I want to do the talk. Like I feel like I want to talk about this. And they're like, okay, sure. And we're leading up to the presentation day, and I go up to my lecturer and I go, we're supposed to do 20-minute presentations, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to talk for 20 minutes. It's going to be longer than that. Like, and I need to. And he's like, okay, like, sure, we'll put you on before lunch and we can just see how we can go. And I'm like, okay, cool. And this herbal tea guy at the local market said I was talking with them about it, and they were giving me advice. And he's like, light a candle at the center of on the podium before you start talking. I'm like, 22 or something like this at the time. And this is the first time like I've spoken in front of a crowd. So I think maybe there was like 60 people in the room or something. So it's just my class, my university class. But I lit this candle and I started my presentation, and I spoke for about 40 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, and there was not a sound in the room. Everyone was completely still. Like I felt like I had their attention, like I had it. And I was like I'd grabbed it and I was holding their attention as I was giving this presentation. And it was like such a rush. Like it felt incredible. And then at one point my professor goes, have you got much longer to go? And the spell broke. I felt it. The spell broke. And all of a sudden, everyone was shifting in their seats. And it was like they remembered, oh, I was doing something. And I kind of started to wrap it up. But that did something to me that I was like, oh, I really enjoyed that. Some of my ideas about facilitation is it's really about attention. And so that was my first taste of grabbing attention. Fast forward a few years down the line, I'm in Thailand. I'm kind of lost. I'd kind of been traveling around learning permaculture and doing all kinds of random stuff. And someone says, why don't you be a teacher? And I was like, all right, try that out. And so I end up as a science teacher to primary 1, 2, and 3 kids in a bilingual school. And so I was a teacher for 4 years.
Wow.
And later, when I finally started facilitating adults, I'm like, adults are easy compared to 6-year-olds. Like 6-year-olds, you got to work. Like to keep their attention is like you've got like 10-minute windows. You got to change it every 10 minutes. Otherwise, they are gone. Adults, you can, if you get a good roll on, they'll sit with you for half an hour, no problem,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
totally.
that really initiated me into like a deeper layer of this. So again, fast forward, a few years, I kind of finished teaching. I started leading groups of students in a volunteerism program in Thailand. So I started getting used to kind of leading groups. So I did that for a couple of seasons. So now I'm getting used to like holding and managing and organizing kind of groups of people, and I just really like that. I lived in Thailand for a long time, and I ran into a guy who was on a holiday there, who was part of something called the Authentic Man program, Authentic World. I don't know if you ever knew of them. They kind of were some of the early pioneers of the practice of circling. His name was Brian Bayer. And so they taught this, kind of did men's work, but in relation to women. And I was fascinated by him. I went along to some men's circles, and I got into their courses after he left. And at that time, I decided to leave Thailand. It was 7 years I'd been living there. I hadn't gone back to Australia in 7 years. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go home. And I connect online with this guy in the course who's living in Sydney. And I reach out to him and I say, hey, I'm coming back to Australia. And the course was all about facilitating authentic relating practices, authentic relating games nights. And I'm like, hey, do you want to do this? And he's like, sure, let's do it. And so I come back to Australia and we just start. We find a place in a chapel, in a church. Neither of us have any experience in doing any of this. And we just start. And we start running these game nights every 2 weeks. And we just got into it. I did that for years. And then so it's just kind of developed from there. So I've really been formally facilitating in that sense for maybe over 13 years now. And then it's like in the past 4 years, I've made a profession out of it. That was a hobby. That was because I was interested in, I was curious. I wanted this thing in the world. So I did it. And now it's my living. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's a big gap from that moment of doing it because you love it to it being a profession. And I
Totally.
think a lot of people start out going, oh, now I'm just going to be a group facilitator and that's going to be my career.
It's like you're going to have to probably show up so many times where there's 1 or 2 or 4 people who show up to a class and there's nobody else, and you have to go through the agony of like, oh God, nobody comes, and then you have to decide to do it again.
It's the initiation for sure. If you make it through that, you maybe have a chance at
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
facilitating. So those early pieces that you were facilitating were more around like circling and authentic relating. And then
Yep.
like that showed you something or gave you something that has now informed kind of a deeper understanding or a more refined space that you're inviting people into.
Yeah, I would say that authentic relating and circling are the scaffolding from which I build everything out of. No matter what course or what event I'm facilitating, I'm using those practices and repurposing them in lots of different ways. And my type of facilitation is I really love to focus on interpersonal dynamics. So I'm really interested in creating depth between people. Right now I focus on intimacy and relationship and attachment and all that stuff. But the underlying premise is actually of people becoming more authentically expressed as themselves,
Mm.
becoming their deepest essence. And I would say that is our main purpose in life. I also do, intrapersonal work, and I've started to do a little bit more of that too. So
Mhm.
more of their relationship to themselves. But I really love to include that kind of, it's like when you reveal a vulnerability, or when I reveal a vulnerability about myself and you witness it, I get to be more myself and be experienced as more myself. And that's kind of the moments I live for. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm just thinking too, I don't think I've had anyone on the podcast yet who's a circling or authentic relating facilitator. So it might
Mm.
be worthwhile to have you just give like a headline of what each of those things are, just so
Yeah.
people, yeah, can follow
Yeah,
us.
absolutely. So, and there's a number of different schools of these kind of approaches, and it comes back to this person that I was talking about in Thailand, Brian Bayer and Decker Kunov, were kind of really pioneering, and there are a few other circling pioneers as well. So everyone is going to define it differently. So I'm going to define these my own way. So authentic relating is the way that I see it is it's a set of communication skills. It's a set of communication patterns so that allow us to do three things. The first is listening. It allows me to listen in a way that supports you to reveal and be more of you with me. So I listen in a way that welcomes more of you out. The second
Mm,
is to express in a way that has more of me show up to be seen. So, so there's two directions here, right? One is listening, I'm receiving you, and the other is expressing, I'm bringing myself out. And the third I call it tuning, which is to create or co-create the experience of us or being we when
mm,
we are, right? And then circling kind of expands off that experience of us or we. Now, circling is the set of skills that we use to continue to deepen and explore and refine what that experience of us is and what can we do with the energy of us. There's a lot of subtle stuff occurring, but we use words um, to create shared reality around it.
mm,
So really, I believe we'll get to a point where we won't need words for that, but words are almost like we can now test without hearing your experience. I'm at this particular juncture, I'm mostly making it up. I can get very good, I can get very good at determining what I imagine your experience to be. But unless I ping it off you, I'm subject until I develop, you know, true empathy skills and telepathic skills. I'm subject to my own interpretation. And if I'm not checking that, then I can get into all kinds of trouble because now I can put projections on you and do all kinds of stuff that will actually diminish you versus support
mm.
you to be more of you.
Beautiful. I love the correlation too that all of these skills are also like facilitator skills. So just
Yes.
by learning them as a participant, you're also starting to
Yeah.
develop some of the foundational work for what it means to be a facilitator, which I think is kind of a little bit of what happens for people. They come to these spaces, they realize that they either really like what we're doing or they have a knack for it. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I did that too. I came and I was like, oh, this is me. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is what I am supposed to be doing and what I want to do, and I'm going to get really freaking good at it. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of the career path. But I love because there's so much of what you spoke about, which is the same words, the same things that I do, but I don't do any authentic relating or circling. I don't
Yeah.
even know if I've ever
Yeah.
even been really to a few of the people who've come in my spaces are circlers and they've brought circle in, but I've never like gone to a professional
Yeah. I
circling.
mean, and it's like, it's what we would call circling is it's just a particular structure around something that exists, which is the intersubjective field. It's the field between us, and circling is one way of navigating it. Just like I could do contemporary dance or ballet or salsa, right? It's all dance, but there are
Yes.
so many different structures of dance, and circling is just one way of exploring that. And there was a period of time where and I developed by being a facilitator, not only by doing free stuff. I was living in my parents. They had a little granny flat underneath their house, and I kind of was burnt out. I'd left Thailand and I was back in Australia. I was kind of a bit of a mess, didn't know what I was doing with my life. But I started running circling just out of curiosity. And I would invite a handful of friends over. So there'd be like, 2 to 5 friends who would come over. And I just facilitated random things. I just had a curiosity about something, and I would try and set up the space and see what would occur. And we had weird experiences of just this space between us, just by Let's see what happens if we enter into a shared field from this angle or this direction, or use this to get us in there. And so that's, my perspective on circling is that there's a subjective experience. So if I turn inwards, right, there is an entire universe inwards, right? Like, I don't know where I end. I haven't explored the completeness of me, and we've got these states of enlightenment, and we've got altered states, and like, there's so much, and I can grow and evolve and heal, and I've got so many states and so much experience inside of me. So that's my subjective universe. Now, between us, there's an intersubjective universe, and that only exists when there's two or more. It cannot exist on my own. That's the intersubjective space, and it's just as vast. So I need another being at least to explore this space that exists, that is a universe, and I don't know what's in there, so I'm curious about that, and I think as we evolve as humans, that space is going to become more and more conscious and more inhabited.
Yes, amazing. And then there's the version of that, which is the group space between all.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so two or more, and
Yes.
it's a field, and it's going to change by every person that comes in. It will change what's available there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. When I facilitate now, I usually say, like, I'm so blank until the moment we step into the opening circle. And then the
Mm,
moment we're all in the opening circle, it's like, okay, I'm arriving because we've arrived. And that arriving of
mm,
all of those bodies is that arriving of the fields or the intersubjective
mm-hmm,
space between all of us. And then for me and my listening device, that's when it's like, okay, game on. Now we're ready
mm-hmm.
to,
I love
yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So let's talk now. I think you have something to share about, like, what is a facilitator or a
Mm.
perspective or a take, and I'd love to hear a little bit about what a facilitator is through your
Yeah,
lens.
yeah. So like I mentioned before, it's all about attention, and I've thought about this a lot. That attention is like, it's like a currency. It's like the thing that we have. It's like how we experience reality. So we're always got our attention on something, right? Our attention is always moving between things, and so there are different ways of working with attention. So, for example, marketing is capturing attention so that you can demonstrate your position in the marketplace, that you have an offer, right? Education is capturing attention so that you can impart information down that, it's like down that aperture. If I capture your attention, it's almost like there's a funnel of your attention coming towards me, and if I hold that attention well, I can put information into that and send it back to you, and now you can do something with that. And there's entertainment, right? Entertainment is also capturing attention for the purposes of giving an experience, changing your state in some way. Like, if I'm a comedian, I capture your attention and then change your state into one that's of humor so that you're laughing or whatever it might be. So facilitation to me is about taking that attention and weaving it into an experience. So a facilitator is interesting in that most of the places of attention are like, I want to capture your attention on me and then do something with it. But what I like about facilitation is, it's like, I want to take your attention and then do something else with it. It's not actually about me. It's like, if I'm really good in my facilitation, you almost forget that I exist. When I do live events, I love having a microphone, but I love being almost like a disembodied voice. It's almost like I'm just a voice that's helping guide their experience, right? And I don't really exist, but it's about what their attention is doing, and their attention is creating some kind of experience. I've got a direction where I want that experience to go, but I don't get to choose what that experience actually is going to be.
You couldn't have taken the words out of my mouth more, actually.
Mm,
Yeah, this is the
mm,
art of facilitation. You just basically
hmm.
nailed
Yeah,
it. To
yeah,
get out of the way.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And what I've found, which is really fascinating, because I'm leading many facilitator trainings now,
Mm,
and and the facilitators practice by facilitating each other. And one of the things that people don't realize, I think, that's happening is when you facilitate, you're actually facilitating someone into your state of consciousness. And
hmm.
so, what happens a lot of times is the facilitator is facilitating, but the participant is like rejecting that state of consciousness, saying, like, actually, that
Mm,
doesn't match, or either I can't reach that state of consciousness, so I fall out,
mm,
or that
mm,
state of consciousness you could say is like not somewhere I want to be. That's not a
mm,
particularly pleasurable or like a
mm,
place where I want to be. So now I'm rejecting that, and then there's like a separation or an othering from that because there isn't a frequency of alignment for that state of consciousness.
mm,
And it's quite an uncomfortable experience to be in that space where people are having these
mhm,
experiences but aren't really sure like how to name it or what's going on. They just feel the feelings of like
mm,
disgust or
mm,
rejection or
mm,
separation or pushing away or pulling away, you know?
mm. Mm. Well, I love that, and I think about like it has my mind start ticking into the kind of the skills of the facilitator, and what was coming to my mind with that is the skill of attunement, which is really about reading the fields, and then there's consent, right? And consent is not like raise your hand if you choose not to share this, like agree not to share this with everyone else. It's like, okay, that's like very concrete. But consent is like that you don't even have to say it verbally, right? It's but like, do you agree or do you accept to come into this state of consciousness? Are you willing to? And if I try and
Mm,
get you to go there when you're not ready or you don't want to, you will reject it. And so
mhm,
there's this kind of like attuned consent. Can I make the space soft, inviting, and spacious enough, so that
mm.
there's no pushing of you that you choose to enter of your own volition. And if you don't, then I either am going to get you rejecting me or I'm going to violate you in some way.
Yeah, yeah. It's also like the buy-in or the intention
Yeah,
setting moment
absolutely.
of like, are you bought in to go on this journey with me? Do you
Yeah,
want to enter my reality? Do you want to enter
yeah.
this shared reality and go on a journey together? And there will be like, there'll always be the outliers. But
Hmm.
that is the process. And when that doesn't happen or land, it's just kind of like a bumpy ride, you know?
Totally. Totally. I've done all kinds of wild facilitation experiments. There was a period of time where I liked to half set up a space and then just stop. Like I would kind of start a process and like it'd be some kind of sharing, like a semi-circling process, and then I would just stop and I would just sit there, and then people would be like really uncertain and be like, what is happening? And I would just sit there and hold the tension. And sometimes it was excruciating, but there was this delight in just like the tension of being like, are you going to do something? And then judgments and projections and everything coming at me, and just holding and holding and holding and waiting to see what will happen.
Yeah. I miss there's a nostalgia that's coming up for me as you speak because
Mm,
facilitating 10 years ago is very different than facilitating
mm,
today.
mm,
And in a lot of ways, I mean, it's both. It's always better and worse. But one of the things I miss is that freedom
mm,
for art and difference
mm,
and provocation, even.
mm.
And the things that we did then that just feel like if you did today, it would be like,
Maybe.
But there's something about that, also with my work, as it's been so much about relational attunement, and people really
Mm,
come for that, like, but to also be a little bit like counter to that, to like there's a part of me that just wants to like push back or like provoke, but not in a mean way, but just like
mm,
in an artistic way even, or in like
mhm,
a what freaking matters way, and like
mhm,
who are you going to be when this happens, and there's this like provocator in me that's really like I'm begging for more spaces to have the permission to say it's not all just let's come together and feel good.
mm.
There's something more that wants to come through as well.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I have a similar thing. I've really enjoyed provoking and kind of just the curiosity and the breaking of convention, the breaking of the rigidity that we might hold
Mm,
ourselves in, and
mm,
like
yeah.
how can we artfully set up a space where that happens, and where like I get into uncharted territory and I don't know what's going to happen, and I used to like I love that.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, me too. That's my
yeah,
that's my jam.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The emergence-based development. I'm curious, of the work that you're doing right now, what is like lighting you up the most? If you could just spend the next week just on this, where would you want to land?
Hmm. It's a good question. There's a relational curriculum that has kind of come through me, and it's not finished, and it's long, right? It's not a
Mm,
simple thing. I'm planning on doing a run through the entire curriculum, with courses, and people can join the whole ride on the membership, if in my membership, if they want, or they can just join for different courses. But I'm planning on doing the entire curriculum next year, and so I would say it's probably less about lighting me up, but and more about finishing the body of work that started to come through. So it's like
mm,
there's a body of work, and I want to complete it, and it's almost like I need to complete it before I can move on to the next thing. And so, you
mm,
know, there's a book that needs to be written to go along with it, right? Essentially, my brand is Evolve Relating, and it's a curriculum for evolution through intimacy, right? It's like,
mm,
and so I guess I would say I'm probably a little bit more in the mechanic than the artist right now.
mm.
Like I'm like putting the pieces together and making it all fit smoothly than I am like creating something new or novel. It's like I kind of already know what it is. There's a few bits to go in, but it needs to come out like that.
I'm super curious if you'd be willing to share, how does the curriculum how does it come alive through you? I'm imagining it is that you're like at home and you're like at your computer and you're like creating this curriculum, but like don't you need data points? So it's like
Mm.
are you working with relating and relationships, or are you going back through your past experiences? Like how is it morphing? How will you create
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's alive in my relationship, and it's been alive in all the people that I've worked with and observed. I would say this whole thing started probably 13 years ago, but I wasn't conscious of it. I wouldn't have been able to say that that's what was happening, but I would say
Yeah.
that, and there was a part, like an observer, that came alive at that time where I really started watching, as well as my own experience and other people's experience. So I'd say it's all of that. And the curriculum is not something that I sat down and designed start to finish. It's created itself, and I've got the main pieces, and then it'll be like weaving it all together so that people can use it for themselves.
Yeah.
It's a set of tools designed to develop skills that then allows you to not have to think about it anymore. That's the goal, right? It's like the goal
Mm,
of learning chords when you play a musical instrument is so that you don't have to remember the chords, so that you can play, right? And so I would say it's the same. It's a set of tools, and some of those tools are concepts, right? There's psychoeducational tools. It's not just embodiment, somatic tools, and then also cognitive tools that we can use to understand ourselves, and that if we do that, they develop our skills, and those skills allow us to actually grow. We develop into kind of a person that's capable of doing relationship like you can do music, playing
mm.
relationship like you can play music. That's the working hypothesis.
That's amazing. And
Hmm.
oh, there's so many questions. So yeah, my curiosity comes in this like we could even just say evolutionary relating, which is what you're
Mhm.
doing, and like the benefits and challenges of doing that like in your own home, just like attending the courses and doing the thing versus like coming into groups and doing that in group containers. And I'm curious about your take on that.
Yeah, I would say there's pluses and minuses to both. The benefits of online and long term, especially, and I try and design my work so that there is enough injunction that you can take it into your life, so that you can do it as a practice in life, right? You get a more sustained kind of experience. It might be slower, but there's a consistency if you approach it that way. The benefits of being in a group immersive experience is that you have a state experience that points you to where you can go. but it doesn't necessarily take you there, because change is something that happens over time with us. As much as we want it to be different, we can have a big experience that will lead us to glimpse what's possible for us, but then we have to go and develop the architecture inside of us to hold that as an ongoing stage of our development, a way of being, of who we are now. My ideal is obviously both. If you can have both of those experiences in combination with each other, we now have pointers, we now have a state experience that goes, oh, that's what's possible. But then we also have a structure that we can sit in that helps us build ourselves into that. It's a discipline, it's a container, it's a practice that helps us build that way. I desire to create retreat experiences at some point. There's a retreat that I've been wanting to develop for quite a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you design retreats, will it be for couples, or would it be just anyone can come and practice intimacy and relating, basically?
I mean,
Yeah.
the retreat that I want to run is called Essence, and it's like I said, the premise is, how do we become more fully ourselves, right? And so it's, how do we become more fully ourselves in a container in an interpersonal container, in a community, a micro community for 7 days. We're going to create a community for 7 days. So while I teach relationship right now, I'm actually and I'm kind of focused on that and family right now. My longer term interest is really community and really groups of humans, because I think that's how we really transform the world. But relationships are kind of really primary to that.
Mm.
If we don't have our intimate, our romantic partnering kind of grounded, it can really tear things up. It's like, if people don't have that part of their life grounded, it's almost very hard to focus on anything else. That kind of constantly oscillates back for those people who want relationship, and even not sex and all of those kind of things constantly oscillate into our experience. They're a fixation point. And if they're not healthy, we won't be able to move together as groups and communities, because that it will always get pulled to that level. So I'm kind of focused there right now because I think it's a very high leverage point. It's been something of fascination for me. It's been something that I had to learn how to do because I really sucked and struggled with it for most of my life.
Mm.
So I've gone, okay, let's focus on romantic relationships. That's an easy marketing point. I can be consistent in my message around that, and we can kind of focus on that for a while, as build my family and build my business and everything, and
Yeah.
then see what happens next. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's also like what you market is best, what's alive for you, like what you're actually with. And
Totally.
then this is what you've been with over the
Yeah.
last years.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. You just mentioned that you were really shit at relating for some time, which is like, there's a part of me that goes, what? Like, I'm
Oh
curious
yeah.
about that version. Like, what are
Oh
some of
God.
those bigger pieces that like, I'm curious about a few of the big milestones from where
Mm.
you were to where you are now, as far as your relational evolution.
There's like a pivotal experience that seemed to have formed a big part of my life when I might have been like 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old, and I had a crush on a girl at school, and I hadn't, like, it was the first time I remember having a crush, and I remember just like the experience of butterflies in my stomach, and I didn't know what to do with it, and so I wrote this note and put it in her cubby. I went to a Montessori school, so we didn't sit in desks. We kind of did whatever we wanted and roamed
That's
around the class. So I
cool.
put it in her little cubby, and her sister was in the same class because we had composite classes, and she was like, they went on this like hunt of like, who wrote this note, trying to figure it out. And it's even giving me feelings thinking about it right now. It's like, when they considered that it might have been me, the level of disgust and repulsion on this girl's face like
Oh,
broke me. It broke me. And I would say it took me 20 years to recover from that. It broke something inside of me. So I kind of struggled all the way through high school. Like, my first girlfriend, I think I was 19, 20, and it was someone that lived overseas in Thailand. Um, but I would say the kind of the first milestone that kind of got me into my power was like my sexuality. When I first started having sex, there's a part of me that when I get interested in something, I like go to understand it at the deepest level. So sex was something that happened for me there. And I started reading Mantak Chia's The Multi-Orgasmic Man, and like kind of exploring this kind of world of energetic sex. And I learned to do sex well. And so that was a point of power for me, but it didn't change that much. You know, I still was really like, I knew if I could get into bed with a woman, things would be fine. But that getting from there to there was not fine, right? So that was one kind of big milestone. Later, when I learned about authentic relating, it was like it was something that I was innate with for a long time. That I used to have very deep conversations with people. When I learned authentic relating, it was like, oh, I had structure to what I was doing, and I could take it even deeper. And suddenly I became a master of intimacy. I went through this period of life where I would go on dates, or I'd meet women. This one time I even met a woman in the park, and like within 15 minutes, she's like telling me her most vulnerable things and bawling her eyes out. And I got really, really good at just like opening people up so quickly. And so I was like, oh, wow, I can take things deep. Still didn't kind of solve my women problems. Couldn't get dates with the women that I was most interested in, you know, like still so awkward on the inside. Then I think I went on a bit of an integral theory and David Data kind of experience, explored a little bit of the polarity type stuff, kind of changed things a little bit. I managed to end up with a woman who I found quite attractive, but then all my attachment issues came up really. I mean, I'd experienced them before, but never like this. And I turned into an absolute mess. And so then I was like, okay, what is this? I got to go figure this out. Right. And so I went and I actually ended up going to university to study psychotherapy because I wanted to understand what the hell was going on. So, you know, and I really was motivated by trying to understand myself. That was how I ended up there. So that was a big milestone. And that was kind of the last big one, you know, that understanding my attachment and starting to understand that there was like a deep insecurity that was driving a set of anxious behavior, and that had always been the case, right? And anxious behavior is somewhat repulsive, you know, it just is, you know, it's like, even though it was generated from little wounds and scars, and there's a little kid that like didn't get his needs met, and actually there's so much innocence in that, the adult manifestation of that is repulsive, you know, and repulsive not necessarily in like, ooh, disgusting, but just like it's not attractive, like it kind of pushes away the thing that it wants. So when I started understanding that, I was like, okay, I'm going to stop doing that. I actually then ended up dating a woman who was more anxious than me, and I got to see the other side of it. I was like, whoa, that really is repulsive. Like I was like, Jesus, that's what everyone was experiencing in me, and that was it, you know. That was it. And I started noticing, like, whenever anxiety started coming up with women, and I could feel the kind of push pull dynamic, I was like, no. And I would just walk away. I'd be like, I'm not interested in this, until I met my wife, Katie. And kind of early on, I spoke about it, and she's more on the avoidance side, of course. And she was like, I'm up for it, you know, like I'm up for this. Right. And so then we just were like, okay, we'll heal this thing together, you know. And so that's been kind of it. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a sweet. This is the equivalent of like the romance fairy tale story that everyone wants, is like someone that
Yeah.
goes, all right, I see the ugly or the bad, and I want to go there. I want to be in this with you.
Yeah, and it really started, you know, because it was my standards where I was like, I am not going to, my energy, my energy of desire, attraction, everything will not go past this. When you're anxious, you've got no boundary. It's just like, oh, you're interesting. Let me throw
Yeah,
everything I've got at you, right? I would go,
yeah,
I'm not going past here, and unless you're in for it, right? You know, so it's like, it was that stand of like, I'm not playing that game anymore, that changed everything, right? And then, you know, it was like really quickly I met her. It didn't take long, you know, but building up to the point where I could make that stand for myself, you know, that was like 20 years, right? Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's so beautiful. It's so true of that. Like when you're ready to call something in, it will come. But
absolutely.
you have to be fully ready, and until you're ready, it's not coming.
And you can't fake it, you know. You can't
No,
go, I'm ready up here, and it doesn't
no,
mean
no, no.
anything. You have to know, you know.
No, no, no. I'm actually, I'm, this is kind of funny and
Yeah.
embarrassing to share, but I'm going to share it. I'm, single for the first time in like 12 years for the last 6 months. And I've just been walking this tightrope of like, oh, am I ready to date again or not? And I've managed every time I attract a man, I attract exactly the same guy, exactly the same thing. And it just happened again. And I'm like, I'm totally not ready to date. Like, until I'm attracting something different, I'm not ready. Like that's the universe saying, like, go
Yeah.
back home and keep
Yeah.
doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
moment when that new thing is attracted, it'll be the universe's reply that like, okay, you've ascended to the next level.
Totally. And it's like the patterns that we experience outside of us are just representations of the patterns going on inside of us. It's like,
Mm,
and we have to change those internal ones for the external ones. To
mm,
to restructure.
totally, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, wow. I am so happy for you. Thank you for sharing. It's a really beautiful, inspiring story. It's like there's hope. Your story gives me hope.
Yeah. And I believe there's hope. Like the amount of people out there who really want deep intimacy is huge. But there's all these kind of like weird glitches in the way. And it's like we just need to kind of smooth out all of these glitches. And then I think as we do, as our subculture, right? And even though you and I aren't living anywhere near each other, we are in a subculture, right? We exist,
Mhm.
and everyone listening to this lives in the same subculture, right? And this world is full of subcultures. There's so many cultures, and each culture has its kind of own developmental structure and everything. And when this subculture starts to smooth those pieces out, and we're trying, right? And that's why it goes through waves of fascination around polarity type stuff and attachment type stuff. And it's like these waves of, because they're trying to smooth. And I think once we do, we're going to have an epidemic of couples. And then we're going to be ready for this next thing, this kind of like community experience. I want to live on community in a retreat that everyone's yearning for. It's like, yeah, sure, we need to smooth this bit out first,
Mm,
otherwise it's not
yeah,
going to work.
yeah, that's beautiful. That's a really beautiful insight. It's not going to work unless we can make relationship work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's the primary relationship, the romantic. I mean, parents is a primary relationship as well, but we grow out of that at some point. But the romantic relationship is our primary relationship because that is what creates the next generation.
yeah,
Um, and in whatever form we do that, but it is our primary relationship. Our romantic relationships are that, and so they need to work. You know,
yeah, 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 and well.
And well, yeah, I mean, they need to work well. In our subculture, we have very high standards for what working well means now. It's like it's not enough to just like kind of sit and watch TV and kind of like sweep any problems under the rug. It's like working well means we can work through challenges and we can like evolve and grow together and we can like we still have passion and like all of these things. It's like
Yeah.
we got big standards, but we can meet them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other part that I find rather challenging is how much the world keeps changing. We're on a trajectory, and at the same time, the end point keeps changing, and the players keep changing. So it's a
Mm.
little bit of a pretty wild moving target. I was driving through the streets of Berlin yesterday, and every time I looked out the window, the people who I saw were on their phones, all
Mm.
of them, all heads down on their phones, all, and I was like, just having this moment of like, what would it have been like to drive around, like, I don't even know, 20 years ago, and no
Mm.
one was on their phone? Like, what a different level of awareness, attention, consciousness, like in the space than being sucked away. And I mean, even just that is a huge growing hurdle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's big, and it's like, but I think that there will be a limit. I think that there will. I've been believing that there's going to be a bifurcation in the human species at some point, and
Yeah.
by bifurcation I mean there's going to be an evolutionary split. It happens constantly in species, right? Where species
Mm,
evolve into two subspecies, right? It's like it happens in every animal, and there's no reason why humans aren't going to bifurcate further, right? It's like at some point there was Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, and they had the same ancestor, right? And they split, and one of them survived and one of them didn't. But there's also lots of examples of a bifurcation occurring, and orangutans and gibbons and apes, we all had common ancestors, and they're all still here. I think that there'll be a split, and I think that it's the level of immersion in technology is what will be the split. There will be those who will deeply immerse in it to the point where they will enter the virtual reality world, augmented reality and then virtual reality. And there are those who won't, right? And I think that will come upon us, right? And we will have to decide, which direction we want to go. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I'd really love to make sure we chat about, even for a moment before we end, which is your personal take on organismic consciousness. And that word, that phrase, when I read it, just like got me kind of aroused, which is like, and I would love to hear from you, your take on it, because it feels like a good moment for that shift.
I love the word organismic consciousness just because of like the subtle hints that it plays in. What we were talking before about the intersubjective field and the we space, I believe that organismic consciousness is when that intersubjective space starts to become conscious. So when the we becomes conscious. So, right now there is a we, but it's not fully conscious of itself, right? It's not aware of itself. So what happens when that we starts to develop its an awareness? And that means that I, as an individual, Damien, become part of we. But I mean, and in some ways we are already part of a we. It's like we live in an interconnected web of humans that you can't actually extricate yourself from. You go to the supermarket and everything that we have contact with is running through other humans. All of it. There is no independence. It's a fallacy. There is no independent human. I mean, maybe there are some living in caves or in remote wilderness on their own, and they might exist, and that's definitely true. But other than those, rare outliers, there's no. And anyone listening to this is not an independent human. But we're in an unconscious intersubjective space, meaning that it's not aware of itself. It just kind of happens. I don't know where my food came from. I don't know the person who is responsible for the internet and our ability to interact with each other right now. Like, I've got no relationship to any of that happening. And it's not even necessarily about knowing the person, but there's a quality of awareness when we become awakened to the ways that we are interdependent. Right? It's like when we are consciously aware of our interdependence, and that means that I know myself at a deeply aware way, meaning that like I can see it, it's like the way I can see my hand and use my hand, it's just become part of me. I can see that I'm being used by the thing that is us, right? That's what organismic consciousness is. And again, like we were talking about, romantic relationships is a place where I think we'll start to see this happen first, where we'll start to see the couple will feel like a unit, and we already do this with couples, right? We refer to couples as a set of two names, Damien and Katie, right? When people talk about us as a couple, they'll say Damien and Katie, right? That's an identifier that's not Damien and it's not Katie, it's Damien and Katie. It's an organism that is composed of the two of us that has its own texture, right? And you'll be able to describe the quality and the texture of our relationship if you were to witness it and see it and spend time with it. You'll know it. So we have these gestalts of humans, and organismic consciousness is that becoming a conscious thing. So we would see that in romantic relationship, and then we might start seeing that in community. We might see small clusters of humans experiencing in that way. And that's when we say the bifurcation, that's what I'm holding out for. I'm holding out for, the ability for us to start tribe 2.0, I like to think of it, to come together as tribal beings together again, but with the whole gamut of development that we've been on since indigenous beings were around, right? So it's not a regression. And so a kind of an awakened tribal experience, which means doing some really scary things like sharing resources, right? I share resources with Katie, no problem, right? Like I don't the concept of mine and hers is dissolved, and it continues to dissolve, and I want it to dissolve. I don't want any delineation between what's mine and what's hers. It's ours. But now we do that as groups of humans, right? That becomes a little bit scary, right? When we start opening our bank accounts and going, right, let's put them all together and see what happens, right? Then we go into how do we do that, the economics of that, which is economics is really how we trade energy, how we trade effort, you know. We start going into vertical transactions versus horizontal. Right now we live in an economic system that is horizontal transactional, you know. I have something that you want and I trade it with you for something that I want, and we use money as a medium of that exchange. Vertical transaction would be I subsume to the greater organism of which I'm a part of, and that thing takes care of me. But I don't transact with you horizontally, I transact up. I give to the organism and the organism gives to me, and we're all doing that. So that's what it might look like at a structural level. But the intersubjective level would be that kind of, and I'm sure you've experienced it in facilitation, right? Like the emergent field where someone speaks and it's like you spoke. It's like they're speaking for you. And that's what it would feel like at the subjective experience. It would feel like now we don't have 2 arms, we have 28 arms, right? You know, it's like they're doing something, but it's like I'm doing it. You know, that kind of thing starts merging. And I start to experience more of that with my wife. You know, she's looking after our baby, but it's like I am because I'm doing the thing that allows her to do that. So it becomes this kind of synergy experience.
Yes, I love this. I mean, what you're speaking into right now is essentially what I'm living for in my facilitation. And I mean,
Yeah.
I like organismic consciousness, but I've just been calling it emergence. Like
Mm-hmm.
when it's like we're so interconnected and aware of and fully embodied presence that we are allowing exactly the natural order, the natural way, the ultimate healing to arise between
Mm-hmm.
us. This is what I'm going to work for.
So, so I would say organismic consciousness is what happens when we live as that emergence. So that emergence is no longer a moment; it becomes who we are. Right? It's
Wow.
now our new stage. And I believe that the reason why some of us are fascinated in exploring this in group spaces because we're trying to test the waters. We're trying to create a groove in the morphogenetic field. The morphogenetic field is the kind of like collective consciousness, and it grows through pioneers pushing into new territories, right?
Mm.
So when we're exploring this as a facilitator and we're pushing into these unknown spaces and people are going there, we're starting to create tracks. We're starting to create like a little bush trail into the jungle, right?
Like new
And then
neural
other
pathways.
people will start walking that, right? And more and more people walk that pathway until it becomes possible for humans. It becomes part of who we are. And I think it's very interesting because I think that developmental stage, it's not here yet, which means
Mm.
that it's an unknown area, which means that we're creating it now.
So with that like vision in mind of where we could go, where we want to go, what we're pioneering towards, what are just any takeaways for people like at home that you have of, hey, that sounds really amazing. I'm totally in for that. What are some ways that I can start preparing, developing myself, getting ready to be kind of a riper, ready being for this evolution?
Yeah. One is you know, you're here to be your authentic self. You're here to be your unique essence, right? That's
Mhm.
so anything that allows you to become more you. So stripping away all of the traumas and the blocks that are in the way of that, and also growing in complexity, which means that becoming more skilled, you know, learning the things that allow you to be more skilled, but also allow you to express more of yourself. So that's one piece. The other piece is continuing to deepen your relationship skills. So that's our ability to listen, our ability to speak who we are, and our ability to experience what it's like to be an us with another person. And so anything that does those things is it. That's the preparation.
Mm, mm. Thank you. That's amazing. That's the perfect way to end. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be here And congratulations again on your little boy. And I'm just wishing you the most beautiful journey. It's just going to keep getting better from here. And
Mm.
so looking forward to your writings and the evolution of your work now through the eyes of your son.
Mm. Thanks so much for having me.